All right. Hello, everybody. You are listening to the Queer Life Radio Show. LGBT news, modern perspectives, roundtable discussions, and interviews. I am your host, Kaiya Kramer, and this is episode 64, Nintendo 64 all the way. And my guest for this evening is a voice that you have heard numerous times on this show, but in a more personal capacity this time, I guess this evening, is Mandi Hauwert.
What way are you getting personal with me?
Oh, we're getting personal. We're gonna bring out, personal. We're gonna bring out the gloves here. We're going full contact. You know what I'm saying? So, yeah, and I kept thinking to myself, I've never actually interviewed Mandy, who.
No. I've talked on this station many times.
So,
but never as a subject. Oh, you got a phone call already.
We're putting her under the microscope right now, and whoever is calling, you can tweet us because we don't have our volunteer this time.
Do you want to take it? Or?
No, it's cool.
Okay.
But yes, if you do want to volunteer for the Queer Life, we do need somebody to help answer phone calls. So again, you are listening to the Queer Life Radio Show, which is LGBT news, modern perspectives, roundtable discussions, and interviews. And this episode is indeed another interview. And disclaimer, as always, when it comes to disclaiming things, is that the word, disclaiming? Whoever. We are not doctors. We are not lawyers. We are not mental health professionals. We are not your friends. Well, I mean, actually, we could be your friends. You find us on Facebook. But seriously, if you need mental health advice or legal advice, please consult your own doctor or your own lawyer. Any articles that we may talk about on here, there are links available on the website. The website is thequeerlife.org. If you're having trouble figuring out what that is, just Google the and queer and life, and I'm pretty sure you'll find it. And we've got links to all the music that you hear on here too, which is all Creative Commons attribution. So we've given some credit where credit is due. If you really love my awesome opening techno music, that's from DJ Maison
with the awesome trap beat. Right?
Yeah, exactly. This is episode 64, Mandi Hauwert. And
what a great numbered episode to be on.
It's perfect. It was like my Christmas when I was a little kid. 64 was the most important number that I wanted to hear.
Well, with Nintendo, right?
With Nintendo. Yeah. So Mandi 64.
Mandi 64. Yeah.
Yeah, Mandi 64. I like that. That's a new console. Take a cue, Nintendo. You might actually have sales next. Sorry, that was bad.
You're really mean to Nintendo.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when your flagship is a game called Nintendogs.
I don't think that was their flagship. I think it was something called Super Mario. But
no, I'm pretty sure it was Nintendogs.
Nintendogs was awesome. By the way. I love the pugs.
But I know. So anyhow, the official title that Mandy has on her Huffington Post page, and yes, I did a little bit of lurking on the interwebs, is Mandi Camille Hauwert is the first openly transgender correctional officer at San Quentin State Prison. An online diary of her transition, blah, blah, blah. She talks about all that stuff on her Huffington Post. On blog. Yeah, I'm trying that's the correct terminology for it, right?
It is my blog on Huffington Post.
Yeah. So do you make any money off of that?
Not a penny.
Oh, okay.
although perhaps Huffington Post makes something off of me. So,
well, at least somebody is winning.
It's mutually beneficial.
You know, it was really trippy as I was going through my my news feed, my LGBT news feeds. I've got all my favorite websites and stuff, and all of a sudden Mandy is, getting into there. I'm like, she's like hacking my news feed right now. Yeah. But I will make a note. Mandy is a correctional officer, and what she is saying this evening does not represent CDCR, the California Department of Corrections. What's the R stand for?
Rehabilitation. Yeah, no, I'm everything I say is speaking for myself.
Yeah.
I don't represent anybody else's opinion except my own.
From the heart.
From my heart.
Yes. From her heart, not CDCR's heart.
Yeah, my heart.
Yeah. And I have links to some of the media coverage that she has been featured in, such as websites such as the Marshall Project, Daily Beast, Inside Edition. We can talk about that later.
Do you want me to answer the phone for you? It's bugging me.
No, it's okay. It's fine.
Did you give him the Twitter handle so they can?
Yeah, just tweet me, bro, at the Queer Life, and I'll get it.
We'll answer the question.
Yeah, we'll answer the question, and on HuffPost Live, which you've been on a handful of times, actually, right?
Yeah, I've been on HuffPost Live 3 times.
Incredible. So, after all that stuff, now I'm finally interviewing Mandy 64, the trailblazer, the voice of a generation, a gay fish, if you will.
Yes, I am a gay fish.
Yeah, breaded, delicious. Again, if anybody gets that, please tweet me. You'd be like one of my new friends.
Yeah,
for reals. But also too, I make a note saying a lot of these titles in here say prison guard. I want to clarify that we don't have prison guards in the state of California. We have correctional officers,
yes,
which are trained peace officers, right?
Correct. And
okay.
I have referred to myself as a transgender prison guard in a few of my own pieces, just to.
It plays better to Google.
It plays better. It plays better. People understand that more than correctional officers.
Oh, wow. So. That's pretty intense. Yeah. Wow. So brave.
You're so brave.
Here we have the bravest person in the world, Mandy. I mean, but, it's I mean, I also want to say that this interview her being a correctional officer is going to be a very, very small part of this interview, because it's a very, very small part of who she is. It's her job, So yeah, she spends a lot of time there, chilling a lot. Up in the watchtower.
Yeah, I go to prison every day and then I come home.
Yeah. Not everybody can say that.
No.
So, I mean, first and foremost, I mean, you're the first openly trans correctional officer. What does that even mean?
Well, at San Quentin, I'm the first openly trans correctional officer. So basically, that's language saying that there might have been other trans correctional officers who were there before me, but they weren't open about it, or at least nobody knows of them.
So they never went on Huffington Post.
Yeah. There have been transgender employees at San Quentin. There are also transgender correctional officers in CDCR. I'm not the only one. I'm not even the first in the department.
Okay, so you are you are the first person who's actually said, I am a transgender woman, or transgender man, because there are cis female employees at correctional officers at the prison, right? I mean, a lot of people are curious, and they've all asked you, and all the articles ask you, what was it like for you to come out as a trans woman at probably one of the most famous prisons in the United States?
Well, I don't know about it. Whether or not it being famous had anything to do with whether or not it was easy to come out there. For me, it was all about 5 years into my career. I'd started in 2007, and about 2012, I started to become very depressed and very aware of my dysphoria and getting tired of it and getting tired of dealing with being stressed out and anxious all the time and wanting to hurt myself.
What for our listeners, can you explain what dysphoria is?
Dysphoria, or a better word, I think, is dissonance. In other words, there was a disconnect between my body, the way it looked and felt, and my brain, the way I felt that it should be. You know, in other words, I had a male body and a female brain. for like to break it down very, very simply.
Yeah, in layman's terms.
Terms. It's so much more complicated than that, and
Right.
any trans person would tell you that. You would say it's more complicated, right?
Yeah.
So what happened is I started kind of doing a little bit of research and looked all over the internet or the interwebs for anything closely related to me. Transgender correctional officer, transgender prison guard, transgender San Quentin, transgender prison, whatever. All these Google searches, and the most I could come up with were individuals who were fired for being who they were. And
Fired?
Yeah.
Wait, you can get fired for being transgender?
Oh, yeah. In many of the states, even here in California, that was the case up until, I believe, say around 2010 when the state law changed. I'm not exactly sure when that is, but I do know that when I first started, they had not added gender identity to as a protected class for work environments, right? Employment. So essentially, I had nobody to look up to, nobody to reach out to. I had found one individual who was up in Canada. At the time, they were less likely, they didn't want to kind of interfere with what I was doing. They wanted to kind of be left alone for a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So I respected their wishes and kind of struck out on my own. And what happened was I came out slowly to a few people who I worked with and determined that it could be done, but I wasn't sure if I was going to lose my job. So what happened is I started wearing little bits of makeup, like mascara, eyeliner. People thought I was goth. I was dark and moody, obviously, right? And they would sit there and kind of look at me, and I think some of the girls had an idea of what was going on, some of the female officers. None of the men had any idea. They already thought I was weird before that.
What made them think that you were already weird?
Because I am. I'm a big nerd. I don't know. I've never fit in anywhere I've been. And most of that's probably due to being a trans person, right? You always feel out of place, and that shows through the way you carry yourself and the way you talk to people. And what happened is one night I'm sitting at work, got almost full makeup on. I got eyeliner, mascara, lipstick, shadow, eyeshadow, rouge. I got a little foundation going on. I was doing the full Monty, right? As far as makeup goes.
Right.
And I'd been called up to my supervisor's office and went in there, and before I went up there, I already knew what they were going to ask me about. So I got all my makeup off, rubbed it all off.
They weren't going to ask you about your TPS reports, were they?
Yeah, you get it coming on Sunday. It may have been a Sunday, actually. I don't remember now.
Oh, gosh.
And, I went in there, and they asked me to come in, sit down, brought another individual in as a witness, I guess, and kind of talked. And the first question out of their mouths, was, what's with the makeup? And I said, I'm transgender. And the next phrase out of their mouth was, well, cross-dressing is not allowed. All right. So already I knew I had work to do.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Could you explain to the listeners why there is explaining and why cross-dressing is not transgender?
Well, from the way I look at it, right? I'm not trying to tell people how to use these words and how they define themselves. If a cross-dresser wants to identify as trans, I have no problem with that. But strictly speaking, the way I use the term transgender, it means anybody who identifies outside of the body they're given. Meaning you have a male body, you identify as female, or you have a male body and you identify as something other than male or female, right? So it can be non-binary as well.
Right.
It doesn't have to be within the binary. Cross-dressers are male-bodied individuals who identify as men, but who enjoy wearing women's clothing.
Right.
So from that aspect, they are not considered transgender. They are considered, or that is considered a type of gender identity or gender expression in this case, which is also protected by law.
Right.
So obviously there's a difference. I was trying to let them know that my intention was to, in my case, transition into living full-time as a woman. What that meant for me was, getting rid of all my male clothing, dressing as a female 24/7, living as a woman, changing my name, changing my birth marker on the birth certificate, on your driver's license, on every single ID that you have, which you recently did. And of course, as you just mimed, scissors. Having, for me, part of that process was having gender reassignment. And obviously that's not the most important part of what we do, right? I've already written about that and I've talked about that. And it's not necessary. It's not
the surgery.
The surgery. It's not something that everybody wants. Even hormones, right? I went on hormones. Not every trans person has to go on hormones. Not every trans person has to have surgery. They're still trans.
So you can still be trans, not without any doctor's assistance.
In fact, what blows some people's minds is you can be a transgender woman, never go on hormones, never want to or go on any other medication, never get any procedures done, and continue to wear boys' clothing and still identify as a female, a trans female, right? There are plenty of women out there who wear boys' clothing. So in this instance, there wouldn't be any difference, right?
Yeah.
They'd still be a trans woman.
Because it comes down to identification.
Right. Being transgender has nothing to do with the process. It has everything to do with how you feel, how you identify.
So, it's okay.
Oh, you're gonna cry.
I'm not about to bully you on live radio.
Go ahead.
So obviously, your supervisors didn't get that memo.
No, and actually, now that I think about it, I haven't really answered your initial question, which is what was it like to transition at one of the most famous prisons in the world?
Yeah.
All I did was describe what happened. What was it like? It was like waking up that morning and feeling like I was going to explode.
Mm-hmm. Emotionally,
I was crying. My entire body was just shaking. And this is the coming out process at San Quentin wasn't just overnight. I got outed basically. Right. I kind of outed myself by
what you weren't like. You don't just go into a room and then all of a sudden you walk out
boom,
and you're
girl. Right. Yeah. No, I sort of outed myself by wearing the makeup to work or wearing little bits of it. So then I was outed when I was asked about that.
Was that intentional on your part?
Yes and no. I had no intention of transitioning as a correctional officer or prison guard, right?
Mm-hmm.
My intention was to leave. In fact, I tried to leave at one point, and at the time, a supervisor convinced me to stay.
So it's like the mafia when, if you try to get out, they just keep pulling you right back in.
They say, I'm going to make you an offer you can't refuse. We're going to pay you. I'm like, okay.
You can act like a man. What are you doing there? Coming in here crying like a woman? Sorry, that's actually my favorite line.
Oh my God.
Anyway.
You just had a moment. Right
I just had a moment, nerdgasm, or filmgasm, I guess.
Well, nerdgasms are allowed on this show, right?
I believe so. Yeah, I'm still working with GLAAD.
As long as you clean up afterwards.
Exactly.
Ectoplasm.
So, explosion. You felt emotionally exploded from
explosive.
explosive and trying to come out reasonably so.
Well, and especially that first day that I knew I was coming to work as a female. At this point, most of the individuals in the prison,
Right.
Both staff and inmates, had heard that there was a trans. I don't know if they heard that there was a trans officer or a trans employee, but they heard it was somebody that a lot of people already knew. Most of them didn't even know it was me at first, right? And then when they found out, and this is what I found out much later by talking to people. When they found out, they were like, "No way!"
So,
I'm a 6 foot tall. Was it broad?
Solidly built,
broad shoulder, as I'm described in a few of the articles.
That's ridiculous.
Solidly built. Yes, I am corporeal.
I'd say you're more squishy than solid.
Oh, that's messed up. I'm gonna go eat a salad.
You're a soft lady. As my mom says, Mandy, she a nice lady.
Yeah. But the actual emotions on that morning, right? That was the morning I was actually going to work for the first time as Mandy, as a woman. It was kind of being in a surreal film noir moment, just like walking up and seeing the prison in the distance, and it was nighttime and it was a little foggy, right? So it's got that kind of eerie film quality to it. And I was working up in a wall post on that day.
What's a wall post?
Wall posts are basically watchtowers that are positioned along the walls of the prison itself, the stone walls. And so they're just little booths that you sit up there with usually a rifle and a 38 revolver. Yeah, we still use revolvers.
What, like Dirty Harry?
Like Dirty Harry. Not quite, but similar.
Say good night.
Good night. And so sitting up there, and what that meant for me, the night shift in a wall post, was that I wasn't gonna have to interact with a whole lot of people, but I would have to see a lot of people on the way there, and that's exactly what happened. And there were audible gasps, looks of disgust, laughter.
This is like an episode of Saved by the Bell, where somebody's walking through the hallways wearing.
And then I go, "Was it timeout?" And everybody just freezes. And then I go, and I talk to the audience.
When I was thinking about walking through work today.
So walking past everybody and hearing what people were saying, and nobody was calling me names.
Right. It was just a lot of hushed whispers.
A lot of hushed whispers, a lot of laughter. Nobody, when they did refer to me using pronouns, they were all male pronouns. I didn't get one female pronoun on the way in. I didn't expect it, right?
Yeah,
at least not
the first day, right?
The very first day.
Yeah.
What I didn't expect is for similar behavior to continue to this day.
So, what? How many years have you been out at San Quentin?
3.5, or almost. Yeah. I want to say 3.5.
3 years.
Yeah, that I've been working as a female officer. Now, let me sprinkle some chocolate sprinkles on that.
Okay.
And say that the Department of Corrections has been extremely supportive of my transition as a department, right?
Right.
As a government agency entity.
So obviously you still have your job.
I still have my job, right?
And you're supported by legally speaking.
Yeah. And the number of individuals that support me and are address me appropriately have gone from nearly nobody to maybe close to 100 or so people, which sounds like a big number.
Right.
But we have over a few thousand employees, give or take.
Right.
Depending on how you count the employees. So that's still several hundred, if not over 1,000 or more individuals who either don't talk to me, ignore me, laugh at me, make jokes at my expense in front of me, or sometimes in front of me and behind my back, and individuals who still cannot gender me correctly. as a female, right?
So what does it mean to gender a transgender person correctly?
Well, most transgender people have a preferred pronoun. So like whenever we meet people in the trans community, we always, one of the questions that might come up, what are your preferred pronouns? Some of us, like, we prefer female pronouns, right?
Right.
She, her, ma'am, miss,
lady,
lady, right? Transgender men identify as men, so Mr., sir, him, he, bro, dude, what's up, dude? Although this is California, so even girls get called dude, right?
Everybody's dude.
Yeah, everybody's dude.
Yeah.
That's kind of a loose one.
Yeah.
But there are also individuals who don't prefer male or female pronouns. So they have like gender queer pronouns, which are like z's, them, their, they, them, so they don't want to be identified male or female. Now, beyond that, if there are any out there, I don't know them yet, but I will.
So we have a couple minutes here before we're going to go away for another short break.
Are we going away?
We're going away. Going away. We're taking you to the farm.
This way. Step inside.
I actually forgot to ask you at the beginning of the interview. The question that I ask everybody is, what are your preferred gender pronouns, gender identity, and sexual orientation?
I thought we went over this already.
So you prefer female pronouns?
I prefer female pronouns. I identify within the binary as a female, and my sexual orientation is straight. Meaning that I'm a female who likes men.
So you are a transsexual woman that's attracted to men. So
straight.
So that makes you straight.
Heterosexual.
That would have confused a lot of our listeners.
It confuses many people.
Yeah.
But that's okay. They're allowed to be confused.
That's okay.
We just think they're adorable.
It's like kittens looking around confused.
You want to go to the park? Are you gay?
Are you gay? Is being gay or straight is the same as being transgender or straight?
No, absolutely not. They're completely two separate issues, right? So gender identity is how you identify. Who you, as we learned in other places, including our group, gender identity is who you go to bed as. Or sexual orientation is who you go to bed with, right? So the person you're attracted to, that's your sexual orientation. And if you think about it, in many ways, your sexual orientation is based on your gender identity. So if you're a female, you're a trans female, you are attracted to men, that would make you heterosexual. If you're a trans female, you're attracted to women, lesbian, right? But there's some people who are pansexual, demisexual, and a bunch of other terms out there that are new ones I keep hearing all the time, and that's great. People want to be able to label themselves if they use labels at all.
And we'll definitely be getting onto that more shortly here, but we are going to take a quick break. But you are listening to the Queer Life Radio Show, LGBT news, modern perspectives, roundtable discussions, and interviews. I am your host, Kaiya Kramer, here on KBBF 89.1 FM, and I'm interviewing Mandi Hauwert, the first openly trans correctional officer. This is episode 64. We'll be right back after this short break.
Para el norte de California, transmite KBBF 89.1 FM.
Porque somos la primera estación radio bilingüe en el norte de la bahía. KBBF 89.1 FM, la voz de la comunidad.
right. Hello, everybody. Again, you are listening to the Queer Life Radio Show, LGBT news, modern perspectives, roundtable discussions, and interviews. I am your host, Kaiya Kramer, and this is episode 64, my interview with Mandi Hauwert, the first openly trans correctional officer at San Quentin. And just another disclaimer, if you're tuning in just now, Mandy does not represent CDCR or San Quentin, or she's just here.
I'm just me
as a nice lady, as my mom would
telling
say.
my business.
Her business. So we were just talking about
Labels.
Labels,
Mhm.
which of course no person is defined by.
No.
Which is why I'm wanting to transition this conversation from being about your work
Mhm.
to about you and your being a human being and a person, and who also just happens to be a transsexual woman. I mean, so you had an interesting time coming out. You've been out at San Quentin for over 3.5 years.
Mhm.
And it's definitely gotten better. There's definitely more work education
Yeah.
to do, but
There's hope.
there's hope. I mean, I just as a general thing, if there was anybody out there who is a who is a police officer, or somebody who's working in that kind of environment and who is questioning their own gender identity, what would you say to them?
I would say anybody who is already in law enforcement, who is trans or maybe identifies or is not sure, you need to find resources. You need to make sure that the department that you're in supports that type of transition within the workplace. Obviously, in California, the answer is yes, right? No matter where you work. Depending on what state you're in, it can be a toss-up. There are several individuals that I correspond with around the country and around the world, actually, who are in law enforcement or transgender. There's a fairly large trans law enforcement community out there,
Really?
A lot bigger than people think. I don't want to say too much about them.
Right. Confidentiality.
Yeah, they do like their confidentiality, but they are out there. And I found them probably a year or so after I came out at San Quentin. So shortly before a lot of my media attention. And they're a very, very good resource. So if there is anyone out there, you're more than welcome to contact me, and I can put you into contact with them.
Yeah.
They're a really good group, and they have lots of information. As far as individuals who are trans, who are thinking about a career in law enforcement, I would and I would not recommend it. Obviously, regardless of whether you're trans or not, you got to be the type of person that wants to do it in the first place, right?
Yeah, somebody who could be a punching bag.
Yeah, you gotta want to be in law enforcement, to be in law enforcement. And,
Right.
and that sounds kind of obvious, but what that really means is you gotta really want to do that kind of a job, because it's not easy.
Right.
It's incredibly stressful. The work hours are often horrible and horrific.
Yeah, you gotta work at 5 and 4 in the morning.
Well, you work
and,
8-16 hours, sometimes
Yeah.
even more if you're a beat cop. The hours are kind of odd or whatever. We
Yeah.
don't do that inside the prison, but depending on the agency you're working for, the hours can be kind of off. And the job is very, very dangerous. Whether you're a correctional officer inside a prison,
Right.
CHP officer on the freeways and highways, sheriff, police, whatever, it's incredibly dangerous, right? There's a very high likelihood of being hurt or even killed on duty. And obviously there's the idea of a reputation. The law enforcement right now doesn't have the best reputation in the world,
Right.
or especially in the United States. And part of that's deserved, right? That reputation, they need to, police agencies, peace officer agencies across the country need to do something about that. It's not going to go away, right?
Right.
There are different reasons for that image, and I'm not going to go into it here.
Yeah.
Because again, I'm not going to defend or represent the career itself on that level.
Right.
What I will say is that if you are trans and you're thinking about a career in law enforcement, just keep all those things in mind.
Right.
That it's very dangerous, it's very stressful, and we need people like you We need
you need more trans people in law enforcement.
And by we, I mean
Why?
law enforcement. Because the more individuals you have from a particular minority group inside of an institution like law enforcement, on organizations like law enforcement, the more exposure they have to people like us, the better it is for the rest of us. Right? So a lot of people who are trans get treated poorly by police, get treated poorly by correctional officers or prison guards. And part of that is that just like the general population,
right,
they don't have a lot of experience with trans people. They don't know how to react. And just like the general population reacts poorly to us, so do they, because they're representative of the general population. They're not any better. We hold them to a higher standard because they have that badge on their chest, but they're not any better than anyone else on the street, right?
All just people.
They're all just people, and they make mistakes and they do bad things, and that's not excusing anything that they're doing.
Yeah.
But to help, not to solve, but to help combat that, you got to have transgender people wearing badges. You got to have transgender people working the phone lines at dispatch.
Right.
You got to have transgender people in charge wearing bars on their shoulder. Captain and lieutenants. And
we need to have a Lethal Weapon movie.
Yeah, with a transgender character as the main person.
Loose cannon cop with nothing to lose.
Nothing to lose except in surgery.
Oh my god. Also as a peace officer, as a law enforcement officer, there's to bring up surgery. There's medical benefits too.
Oh yeah.
And do the medical benefits cover?
They cover certain things. My surgery was covered through my insurance with the department as a state worker, right? So not just CDCR, but state workers in general. So whether you're, CHP or any other type of state job, that coverage is there for you, and the same coverage that I have. I was extremely lucky to be able to afford the procedure, which is insanely expensive, as you know, right? And again, these type of questions, I'm becoming more and more less inclined to talk about and answer. But for you and for a trans audience, I'm willing to talk about it because it is important to many of us, right?
Why is it something that you don't want to talk about as much?
I've already talked about it a lot, right? I've written about it. one of my Radar articles is called "Going Back to San Quentin Without My Penis." I did not title that. That was my editor.
What's that article about?
Well, let's explain.
Yeah. By the way, any articles that Mandy has written, and that's why I'm not going so deep into her work, because she's written plenty.
I've written a lot about it.
Her work as a transsexual correctional officer, working with transsexual inmates, and you can read all about that on her blogs, which I have links to all of them. It's available on thequeerlife.org, episode 64.
On a whole page of links.
It's a whole page of links. You can, it'll be a link awakening. You'll get all you want. So check it out. She's got articles on Radar. Take this. And on Huffington Post as well, which we'll be getting into talking about in a little bit. But
okay, so what's this about my life?
So about your life. So let's talk about you. What are your goals as a quote unquote post-op trans woman who has already gone through the fire of having come out at San Quentin, and you've become quite an activist lately.
Yeah, I've been out and about in different places, speaking at a few colleges, not that many, like only a couple here in the area. And then down at UCSB, I got to speak to an amazing class of photojournalists with Professor Richard Ross down in UCSB, who's one of the individuals that first covered my story after the original San Quentin News piece came out. And
on the Marshall Project, right?
The Marshall Project was what Richard wrote for, Richard Ross. And it's been kind of crazy because I've been telling my story to him, to a reporter from New York City for the Daily Beast, telling my story on Radar in my own words, telling my story to HuffPost Live out of the blue. Like, if I remember correctly, they contacted me like that day or maybe even just the day before. I didn't have much time before they contacted me, and they're like, hey, you want to go on this afternoon?
Oh, geez. Short notice.
And, I went on and did my thing. And then after that, I got the retention from Inside Edition and was interviewed by Zoe Tur, which, I've heard you talk about Zoe on here.
Yeah, could you remind us who Zoe Tur is?
Zoe Tur is a news reporter or correspondent or whatever she was for a little bit with Inside Edition, and now she kind of runs the circuit of doing different talk shows and talks about trans issues. And she is a transgender woman who used to famously be known as Chopper Bob, who was famous for covering the O.J. Simpson white Bronco chase.
Yeah.
Right. And from what I understand, the technology that allows them to do that inside the choppers, she's at least in part responsible for that technology.
Wow.
So from what I know, I'm not confirmed. So I got to do that, and then I went in to have my surgery, and while I was there, we recorded a little bit of video for them for the Inside Edition piece. Marcy Bowers made it on the article on the Inside Edition video about me.
Who's Marcy Bowers?
Marcy Bowers is my surgeon. She's the kind of like the transgender rock star of trans, like GRS surgeries and stuff like that. And she does
like Nip Tuck.
She does a lot of amazing work, not only within the trans community, but abroad as well, dealing with victims of female genital mutilation, doing reconstructive surgeries pretty much for free.
Oh, wow.
As far as I know. And she's an amazing woman. She's also trans herself, so that makes her even that much more special. A
trans surgeon performed gender reassignment surgery on you.
Yeah.
That's pretty meta.
It's very meta. And but to me, what that means is that she understands in a way that a cis doctor will never understand. I don't care how many procedures a cis doctor has done, how many gender reassignments a cis doctor has done. That doctor, whether it's a he or she, will never understand the importance of this procedure for some of us, how important that is for some of us.
Right.
They just can't. They can hear our stories, they can, but they'll never have that connection.
Right.
The connection that I had, the connection that Marcy has to that procedure and how important it is for many of us.
Why is that exactly?
Because they're not trans, right? It's simple. They're just like I'll never know what it's like to be them. I'll never know what it's like to be cisgender.
Right.
I'll never know what it's like to be happy within my own body.
Mm-hmm.
To me, that's a foreign concept. To me, the way I am is normal. The way you are is normal. That's our normal. It's not abnormal. It's not weird.
Abnormal.
Abnormal. The way they are. To us, that's abnormal. That's weird. Mm-hmm. How weird is it that you feel okay in your own body?
That's a trip. Yeah.
Right. That's weird, right?
Yeah, it's really weird.
Now we know it seems to be more common. We can say that.
Let's say maybe like 99%.
99%. Through observation, we can say it seems to be common. And I say seems to be because we don't know.
Right.
They may be hiding. They may be keeping something from us or even themselves.
Right.
But we're assuming they're happy within their own body. Now, that doesn't mean they might not want to have a tighter tummy or a bigger breast or whatever.
Yeah.
That's different.
Yeah.
Right. Wanting to have a hotter body or whatever is totally different from anything that we go through.
Very interesting. I want to talk to you about your work. You've been doing quite a bit of writing. What we mentioned earlier that you were talking that you've done a number of pieces on San Quentin. But I mean, what are your goals with writing, and where is that going?
Well, right now my goal as a writer, and I only just recently started to call myself a writer, mainly because everyone kept calling me one. I just kind of, about a year and a half ago, I started sharing just whatever I was feeling at the time on Instagram, which that's your fault. You got me on Instagram, and I'm like, I don't want to do it. I don't need it.
What is the point?
What is the point? And then I'm all addicted to it. I started posting on there, and as soon as I started posting on there, I'm like, well, I don't want to just put a picture or a selfie, because I was happy with my selfies. They were great, and I was starting to look cute. And, I started to like the way I looked on day to day, right? But I wanted to put a little something with it. And I think the very first post I ever put up on Instagram had a picture with kind of a sun flare behind me, and all I posted was lens flare.
Did J.J. Abrams take that picture?
Yeah, he probably did. Right? But that was like my first post. I just wrote lens flare, right? Not very epic as far as a writer goes. But after that, I started sharing quotes that I loved. Mm-hmm. And after I ran out of funny quotes from like Terry Pratchett and Douglas Adams and some of my favorite, comedic authors.
All good stuff.
Carl Sagan, not a comedic author, but
still good stuff.
Still good stuff, right? I started sharing my own thoughts on how I felt that day, what I was thinking about, what was running through my head that week, my progression as far as I understood myself. So I kind of put it out there, and I wasn't just going, I feel crappy, mm-hmm. I feel this way, or I feel that way. I was doing it in a way that for me was the only way that I could express it. And that's a lot of metaphor, a lot of roundabout explanations to explain simple emotions, but doing it in a way that was very complex. At least for me, they were complex, right? It doesn't mean big words. It just means in a way that for me feels right, it feels beautiful, mm-hmm. rather than just, I feel sad. So that kind of progressed, and people started to follow me. I ended up with nearly over 1,000 followers at one point. Now I have like almost 1,400, which is not a lot, but for somebody who doesn't post a bunch of sexy pics,
right,
that's not too bad, right?
You don't post sexy pics?
Well, I call them, they're sexy to me, but, it's just face pics, right?
Right.
Just a lot of vanity going on.
Yeah.
And
sorry, guys.
Yeah. And people started to really respond to my writing. And it was the first time I started to realize that not only I'd always known I was good at writing, as far as like I could put together a paragraph and have it make sense. I'd written a bunch of term papers for an ex of mine.
Wait, you wrote term papers for your ex?
Shh.
We are on live.
Okay, so moving on. I was good at writing, right? So I could put together a paper and have it make sense for people and get good grades.
I mean, you write some really beautiful, very expressive stuff. Do you mind if I read one of them? Mm-hmm. This was a piece from Instagram that came out on October 30th, 2014. And it reads, "Poised on the horizon, gazing out into infinity, my heart flutters. Ahead, the great unknown, every outcome possible. My entire body sits, tense, unable to release the sense of unease which accompanies the vista before me. However, behind me, chaos. I cannot turn back, cannot return to that which has forsaken me, held me. So, without fear, without reservation, I descend into the void."
So, what does that mean to you?
Okay, class, let's discuss this.
It's very meta.
That's like meta, like super meta.
But see, that kind of stuff comes really easy for me.
Yeah, that comes easy to you.
It does.
That's crazy.
That's why I never felt like an amazing writer, is because I would just spit that out in a few minutes and put it out. It's when I try to be a great writer, then I kind of overdo it, and then I'm very critical of everything I write. So lately, in a lot of the writing I've been doing, recent writing, I just try to spit it out in the same way, and maybe do a few edits, kind of smooth it over, get rid of the abusive commas, and then kind of put it out and see what people think. Sometimes people don't respond to it at all, and that's fine. I don't care. I'm not putting most of it out. I'm not putting most of it out there for other people. It's for me.
Right.
I share it because I know people sometimes get something from it. So I'm wanting to share that. So they're just getting a peek inside my head and the way things work. And if it speaks to them, then that makes me even happier about what I'm doing. And so stuff like that kind of snowballed into doing bigger and bigger writing projects. So what eventually happened is obviously I started writing my diary pieces for Ratter. And I did 6 of those where I talked about my transition at work. And those pieces are a lot more straightforward than what you just read.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, they're meant for mass consumption on the internet. So your writing style is way different. And then I had done a few smaller projects for private individuals that were not necessarily online, but they were for different smaller things. And those led to bigger and bigger projects. So now I'm actually working as a biographer for Jessica Lynn.
Who's Jessica Lynn?
She is the president of Your True Gender. It's a nonprofit organization based out of the Central Coast here in California. And they're kind of an organization that works on education. I don't know if I'm allowed to talk about some of their goals, but they have some bigger goals in mind. And one of the things that Jessica does as a part of that organization and as its president, and she goes around the country speaking to a bunch of colleges, universities. She's going to places like Dartmouth. She just came back from the University of Texas. She went to Notre Dame.
Better be careful. University of Texas has an open carry policy now.
Yeah. I believe she's slated to go to the Kinsey Institute, which is pretty big, right? So she's going all over the country at this point, telling her story. And, maybe we can get her on your show and she could talk about her story for you.
Yeah.
But she hired me as her biographer because she loves the writing that I do. And that kind of empowers me a little bit. And from that relationship, I started doing other writing projects. And then one day I wrote just a weird piece about my parents for Facebook.
A weird piece.
I don't know if you can pull it up. But it's my first HuffPost piece, right? And what it was though is I wrote about my parents, called it For Mom and Dad, and it was just a Facebook post, and I shared it on a trans support group on Facebook, and somebody made a comment saying that it should be on Huffington Post, or it would be perfect for HuffPost. And I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting. I know a few people on Huffington Post, so because I'd been interviewed by them. So I kind of sent a copy of it along to them to see, hey, do you think this is true? Is this something that HuffPost would publish? And they loved it and sent it along to individuals at HuffPost gave voices, and then published it and invited me to be to join the blogging community on Huffington Post. So that's kind of how that happened. I don't know if you found it already, but
it's hard to find things on Facebook.
Just type in a trans history. If you go to Google.
Oh, okay.
It's on
a trans history. Yeah, I've got it here.
Yeah. If you want to read it, I mean.
Yeah. This is a letter Mandy wrote, which ended up on Huffington Post, which first started out as a Facebook post for Mom and Dad. The day he was born was happy and frightening. Your first child together as a couple, and he couldn't breathe. Baptized, given last rites, prayed over. After major surgery, he survived, your miracle baby. Then you brought him home, a tiny thing, barely visible inside his blanket. When he learned to explore the world on all fours, no object escaped his curiosity or his grasp. At 3 years old, you brought home a ready-made best friend. She so fascinated him, different, a bond that was instant, one that would only grow as a sibling duo took over your lives. In your eyes, he was special, gifted, An artist, writer, and an athlete. He was involved with many activities: ballet, Cub Scouts, baseball, gymnastics, martial arts. He volunteered in libraries, performed in school plays, threw rifles as part of an ROTC drill team. Without warning or notice, he left home. In the Navy, he met a girl. Their blossoming relationship held promise for grandkids. It seemed to you that she took advantage of his kindness, that she used him. But she knew what you had yet to discover. The fairy tale ended, and he returned home, broken, unsure, and lost. He found stability in a most peculiar place, prison. He took great pride when he swore in as a peace officer, more so when you jokingly told others he was in prison. You saw this as his greatest chance at happiness, until he flipped your whole world upside down. From his earliest memory, he felt like a girl. You wanted to know what you had done wrong, what mistakes were made, questioning your ability as a parent. You worried about the whisperings of others, and you felt like you were losing your son. You said that you loved him, but couldn't accept her. You struggled with the loss, what it meant for his future. You feared for his safety. Your love for him never ceased. Difficult in this new reality. From family and friends, you feared rejection, even condemnation. You witnessed the suffering brought to a child from disownment. You broke down the barriers erected to shield you from the shock, began to let go of him, to welcome her. You accept the gravity of her new life, yet it remained difficult to deal with her, talk with her, look at her, a task facilitated through her ready-made bestie. Then it happened, your renewed conviction to support her, speaking no longer of what was lost, but gained, becoming an active participant in her journey towards womanhood. You took pride in her accomplishment, her bravery, and beamed with joy as she found her voice, her purpose. You are listening to the Queer Life Radio Show, LGBT news, modern perspectives, roundtable discussions, and interviews. I'm your host, Kaiya Kramer. I'm here with Mandi Hauwert. This is episode 64. We're going to go away for a short break, but we'll be right back and continue this interview with Mandy, and we're going to be jumping into some news and perspectives portion of the show. Again, you are listening to the Queer Life Radio Show here on KBBF 89.1 FM, Calistoga. Thanks for listening. We'll be right back.
This is KBBF 89.1 FM Calistoga. Esta es KBBF 89.1 FM Calistoga.
Desde Santa Rosa, para el norte de California, transmite KBBF 89.1 FM.
right, everybody. Hello. You are listening to the Queer Life Radio Show. LGBT news, modern perspectives, roundtable discussions, and interviews. Mandy's got this funny look. Anyway, my guest for this evening is Mandi Hauwert, the first openly trans correctional officer at San Quentin, trailblazer, voice of a generation. Gay fish. Frequent contributor to Huffington Post.
By the way, when you were reading my piece on HuffPost, I wasn't aware that I had written anything about this show at the end of it.
As I was reading it, I ran out of time.
I'm like, oh, that went straight into me writing about this show just out of the blue.
Wow, I totally don't remember that. I'm Hacksaw Skills is. If you'd like to read that article and the rest of Mandy's articles, you can visit. I've got a link to her Huffington Post on thequeerlife.org. This is episode 64. Or you can just go to huffingtonpost.com/Mandi-Camille-Hauwert. But if you're having trouble spelling things, the Queer Life will help you.
Yeah, it's got all you need.
Everything you need. Sports
The
stores.
Queer Life has what plants crave.
Yeah. You've got questions, we've got answers. Wait, I think I stole that from somebody.
I'd buy that for $1. No.
Put a smile on. Everybody come on. Wait, I think that's the McDonald's.
Are we just going to do TV references and movie stuff for the rest?
All right, I'm cutting it off right here. Anyhow, I want to ask you just a couple other things about your life, and I know for myself, and I know on this show, I'm addressing the audience here. I try not to speak about me and my own personal questions. I'm trying to be your voice to get the answers.
Not my voice, but the
not my voice. I'm getting confused.
All right, go ahead.
Yeah, but as another trans woman, I'm a trans woman, I'm transsexual. And just to the audience, Mandy, the issue is Mandy and I are friends, and we're both trans women. And the conversations that we as trans women have are interesting. I think that they're interesting from a cisgender perspective. They're interesting to me as a person participating in it. But the questions that we ask each other about are very interesting. We ask each other similar questions that I feel like cis people would ask us, but it comes from a personal place. And it's you and I have numerous times about what it feels like to take estrogen, undergone hormone replacement therapy, or what it's like to have gender reassignment surgery. Because even amongst ourselves, it's a scary thing. A lot of cis people would say, "Oh, right, that's really scary. How, are you sure you want that? It's you realize you can't go back."
You mean it's not like South Park?
It's not like South Park, Mr. Garrison or Mrs. Garrison,
where you can grow it on the back of a rat.
On the back.
Just get a new one. Right?
Just get a new one. But I mean, you and I have talked, quite a bit about surgery on our own hands. And speaking from my own perspective, I have gender reassignment surgery lined up, and I've gone through my own process of trying to understand what that means. What did it mean for you, trans person to trans person, to have the surgery?
Well, one of the things I noticed for me, and when I've talked to other individuals who are scheduled for their surgeries, is many of us, not all of us, who are scheduling that surgery get incredibly depressed. You get really nervous and anxious and scared, right? I want to say an expletive, right? But you know,
Yeah. Freaking scared.
freaking scared, right? And it's scary, and because on one hand, you've been telling yourself for years, if not decades, that this is something you not only want, but you desperately need, right? So the fact that you're about to get it scares you, because what if you get it and you're not happy? What if you get it and you're even worse off? You know, what if you get it and something bad happens?
Yeah.
And for me, the answer to all of those questions are, I already know that what I have is not what I want or what I need. And so the answers to all those questions didn't matter, because whatever I have now, whatever I had then, I knew I did not need or want, right? It was driving me crazy. And the other part of that is when you finally know you're going to be, fixed, if you will, or cured, or however you want to look at it.
Right.
Your birth defect is going to be corrected, right? The way some trans people put it. When that finally happens, it's almost like one of the reasons the depression kicks in as well is it's almost like knowing that Christmas is around the corner.
Mm.
And what happens when you're a little kid and you're like, next week, presents, and you see them under the tree and you know they're there, you know you will get it.
Right.
It drives you nuts,
Mm-hmm.
right? It drives you crazy. So knowing that you're going to be getting your surgery, knowing that your life is going to change forever, whether it's positive or negative, it drives you nuts. You almost can't wait for it. And then as it gets even closer and closer and closer, like wedding jitters,
Mm-hmm.
you start to have second thoughts. Now, not everybody does. I really didn't. But it is common experience to have second thoughts. And that's just a fear, But what I would say is if what you have now is unbearable, then what's on the other end doesn't matter. Because you already know what you have now is unbearable. In other words, for me, the thought of dying on the operation table, I didn't care. I'd rather have been dead than to continue to live with what I had.
Mm-hmm.
And that was for me, right? That's me personally. That's not applying that to the entire community. And of course, during this whole discussion, we need to, again, reiterate,
Yes.
not every trans person wants the surgery,
Right.
needs the surgery. Many trans individuals are uncomfortable talking about it, and that's fine.
Right.
For those of us who are comfortable talking about it, cool for you, right? Good for you, right?
Yeah.
Like I said, I'm getting to the point of, unless it's in the context of speaking to other trans people like yourself or anyone who is trans listening, then it's important to talk about it. These conversations are not for cisgender people, but cisgender people can learn from them. They
Right.
can learn from the fears that we have going into it, that it's not 100% sure. I don't know anybody that I've talked to that was 100%
Mm-hmm.
sure that they were going to go through with it,
Right.
or 100% positive about it. Everybody has a little bit of fear, a little bit of anxiety, and they're second guessing themselves quite a bit, or at
Right.
certain points, right? And I just want to say, for you, right? As your friend, I'll support whatever decision you make, because what's important is your happiness, and I would not want to feel responsible at all for that. And you are responsible for your own happiness, right? So to determine whether or not that's appropriate for yourself, you need to ask yourself whether or not what you have now is unbearable. And if it's unbearable, then the answer should be yes. But even if it's not unbearable, and the thought of just not getting the surgery, it scares you as much as getting it, right? Because it is irreversible. It is unchangeable.
Right.
You cannot go back, at least not in the way that you might hope you can go back. There are certain parts that are gone forever. Okay. If you want to know what those parts are, you can read one of my articles. So.
Exactly. Which we have available on thequeerlife.org.
But in reality, in reality, the surgery outside of our community, and even inside in some cases, is not all that important. In other words, it's not important that we describe our surgeries to other people. It's not important that we continue to talk about them. Now, I already have done both of those things. I've described it, I've talked about it, but I was excited, right? I was so happy. I wanted to share with everybody. Anyone who wanted to listen, I would have been like, I have a hoo-hoo, right? And I was incredibly happy and ecstatic with that. But my attitude is definitely changing, right? And I want to respect the idea that transgender women, just like women in general, are so much more than
their genitals.
Our genitals, right?
To put it bluntly,
yeah. Because a lot of the time when we focus on our genitals, it takes away from the struggle and the journey that we all go through. It takes away from those trans individuals who don't want or can't afford,
right,
or don't have access to those procedures.
Yeah.
So it kind of silences them and puts them in the background. We don't want that to happen.
Yeah.
It erases the identities of non-binary folks, right? Who may or may not seek some type of surgery.
So trans people aren't defined by their genitals.
No.
They're not defined by the way that they dress. They're not defined by the interesting places that they work.
No. The way I put it to some people is that if you're willing to have a serious discussion with me, I'll talk about almost anything. But I always try to make those individuals aware that when we are having a discussion, that certain topics, I'll let them know, hey, this would be an inappropriate topic of conversation. If you were just talking to some random trans person, you wouldn't walk up and ask them about their genitals.
If you're in line at Starbucks, and you see
don't ask
a trans woman behind you. Oh, have you scissors?
Hatchet?
Yeah. Right? If you, I'm gonna step out there and say, if you're talking to a trans woman in particular, somebody who is born a boy and is presenting as a woman,
or assigned male at birth,
or assigned male at birth, layman's terms here.
Yeah, layman's terms.
But the correct term is assigned male at birth.
Yeah.
Don't use scissors, hand gestures or hedge clippers or chainsaws or guillotines. It's kind of gross if you think about it.
It is, yeah.
And also realize, and this is not to put you down for being curious.
Yeah.
Human beings, we're curious. Cats, they're curious. It's just National Cat Day. But unless you're very close with this person, it's not appropriate to ask somebody about their genitals. And even if you are close or you've been Facebook friends for a while, you wouldn't go and ask somebody, how's your period cycle doing? I remember you said that when you were a kid you had a small penis. Is it still small? These are similar questions.
Are you circumcised?
Are you circumcised?
Yeah.
And a lot of people would say, and I understand. It's like, well, it's transgender. It's different. Not everybody gets there.
Well, the biggest reason I think why cisgender or non-transgender people focus on our genitalia whenever they hear that you are transgender is because they associate gender with genitalia. In other words, they hear the word gender, they think,
boys have penis, girls have vagina.
Exactly. Right. So automatically they start thinking about what's in between our legs.
That's automatically they start thinking, I mean, let's put that out loud. It's like automatically you start thinking about what's between my legs. It's what?
Well, because they associate gender and genitalia to be the same thing.
Right.
And in the trans context and in the way we define everything, gender is what's in between your ears, inside your mind and your brain or in your heart.
Right.
If you want to define it that way. It has nothing to do with your genitalia. It's all on how you identify. So if anything, they should be asking us what's in our hearts, what's in our minds, what are we feeling? What does that feel like?
Yeah.
Those are appropriate questions.
Yeah.
What does it feel like to be trans?
Yeah.
Not what does your neo vagina feel like?
Yeah. Or when are you getting the surgery?
Yeah, when are you getting the surgery?
Yeah.
For me, it was really important, right? Like the surgery, but again, it's not. It should not be the focus of a conversation between a trans person and a cis person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, pretty Simply said. Before we dive into the news section here, is there anything else you'd like to say to our listeners? No.
But I don't know. You looked at me. I don't know what happened. What I would like to say is that if you are transgender, right, and it's kind of the spiel that I believe you still give at the end of most of your episodes, if not all of them, just to realize that you're not alone out there in the world, that there are people like you. And obviously that's becoming more and more apparent, right? There's all kinds of trans people on the news. And find somebody you can talk to, and somebody that either can relate to you or you trust enough to talk to. And that's the important part when you're starting to come out, is having a confidant, somebody who you can trust in and talk to about anything and everything, whether that be a cisgender person or a trans person. So that's, kind of what I wanted to add to that. I know at the end you talk about reaching out to people when you're depressed and all that, but we'll let you do that at the end.
A little fireside chat thing.
Fireside. Hey, welcome to the queer life. You don't want to scare them.
Oh gosh. Anyhow, you have been listening to the Queer Life Radio Show here. We're going to go away for a quick break, but we'll be back and we'll be entering the news and perspectives portion of the show. You are listening to the Queer Life Radio Show here on KBBF 89.1 FM.
Buen fin de semana y que le mandaba saludos a todos los staff and volunteers de Radio Bilingüe y también a su familia Reyes en Fresno y en Bakersfield. Que tengan un buen fin de semana. Muchas gracias, Eric. Y bueno, si ustedes nos quieren también mandar algún mensaje ahí en el Facebook, facebook.com/elluitote. ¿Y qué es lo que hacen? Ahí en mi trabajo, en mi otro trabajito que tengo por ahí, hicieron un costume contest y yo me disfracé así de Elliot, así del E.T., del extraterrestre. Entonces ahí tenía mi canastita con el E.T. adentro y
right, everybody. Again, you're listening to the Queer Life Radio Show. I'm your host, Kaiya Kramer, and I just interviewed Mandi Camille Hauwert, who is the first openly trans correctional officer at San Quentin. She's going to stay here and join me for the news hour, or the news 40 minutes.
Actually, you locked the door, so I can't get out.
Yeah, it's... And first up on the list here is an article from Clint Kendrick from HuffingtonPost.com, where Mandy is blogging on. This article is called 5 Ways Young LGBT People Can Get Involved in Politics. As you know, we have an upcoming presidential election, and we've got an interesting role, because our in terms of trans people and LGBT people and all, I mean, we've had the Supreme Court ruling on same-sex marriage, which is pretty mind-blowing.
Yeah, it was a great day. It happened, I believe, just around Pride or on Pride or before Pride.
Yeah, strangely appropriate.
Well, San Francisco Pride.
Yeah, San Francisco Pride.
Which, of course, is the best day for it to happen.
Exactly. You know, San Francisco is LGBT Mecca anyway.
Yeah, that's the way. No.
No. Anyhow, and I mean, a whole bunch of religious freedom restoration laws have popped up all over the place, which have basically given businesses the right to discriminate on the basis of religion.
Mm-hmm. What do they call them? Religious protection?
Religious Freedom Restoration Act is the one they have in Indiana. Kentucky has one. Texas has one. Arkansas has one. I mean, this list I'm reeling off here is probably not going to come as a surprise.
I wonder what else they're going to try to roll back. You know, what other civil rights and
maybe segregation.
Segregation.
Making LGBT people eat at the back of the restaurant. Actually, we don't even get that in those states.
No.
If they refuse business,
you don't even get into the restaurant.
Yeah, don't even get into the restaurant. So that's happening, but that's sort of good because it means that it's times are changing, and for true change to happen, there's bumps and waves, and it just means that this is a big deal and it's on people's minds rather than it not being thought about at all. And I'm speaking for the entire queer community, the LGBTQIAANB community. Anyhow, over the past decade, the LGBT community has made significant strides towards full equality. We have leveraged the political process to achieve many of our important goals. These goals included passage of hate crimes legislation, the right to openly serve in the armed forces, and marriage equality. You were in the armed forces, right?
Yeah, I was U.S. Navy.
So if you wanted to, you could maybe go back.
If I wanted to.
If you swab the deck, sailor.
Oh my God.
Anyway, sorry.
Let's just say the Navy was already there ahead of everyone else.
I'm imagining an entirely gay and trans branch of the Navy.
Oh my God. That would be the most interesting ship in the world.
The gayest ship in the South China Seas is now approaching China to face off with battleships with rainbows.
Yeah, that'd be amazing.
Sorry, I just enjoy this way too much.
I think this should happen. We should get a campaign, a petition going.
Yeah, there needs to be like the gayest battalion is out there. They're called no, sorry, that's like Civil War terminology. Clearly, I was not in the military ever at any one point. Thank you for your service.
You are welcome.
Anyway, while marriage equality was an important milestone for our people,
Our people.
We still have other important goals to achieve. Yes, of course. In over half of the United States, it's still perfectly legal to fire a person just for being LGBT. If you and your future partner want to adopt children, and in many states, you may have trouble finding an adoption agency that will actually support your desire to add to your family. In most states, you could legally be refused service in a store, as we were talking about, not allowed to eat in a restaurant, or kicked out of a hotel just for being queer identified.
Or as one of the recent stories that came up in the last few months, you can be accused of being a prostitute for being trans in a hotel.
Remind me again which one that was.
I forget. It wasn't that long ago, maybe a few months ago.
Are you talking about me when I was...
Well, you too, right?
Because that happened to me.
That happened to you. So we could talk about your experience of being at a hotel.
Oh my gosh.
Of being at a hotel while trans.
Hotel while trans.
Well, okay, let's, as part of this discrimination issue, let's talk about that for a second.
Okay.
What happened? Tell us. Dish.
So when Mandy and I were staying at a hotel, yes,
Yeah.
we were staying at a hotel.
Long term.
Long term, yeah.
Yeah.
More on that later.
Yeah.
I was I had a long day at work. I got home. I hadn't changed out of my work clothes, which was a pair of black dress shorts.
Now, when you say work, what kind of work did you do?
I was not. I have a lot of clients, officer.
Oh my god.
Oh my god. I'm a computer technician and a web designer, and I went to people's houses to fix their computers.
And you like to dress fancy.
And I wore dress clothes. And the dress clothes I happen to have were black shorts. They were dress pants shorts. And a black top. And
She says she fixes computers, but I've never seen her own a computer even. It's weird.
I'm using a computer right. Anyway, I was wearing a big poofy jacket because it was really cold out, and I was trying to quit smoking, so I was using an e-cig. So yes, I know I was a transsexual woman standing outside of a hotel with shorts and a big poofy black jacket, smoking a cigarette.
And prostitute.
So
Yeah.
the police rolled by in an undercover car. They came out. At first, I thought it was just a bunch of dudes with guns. I was like, "Oh my god, this is really scary."
Why are these people with guns coming at me?
And this other person whom I was talking to happened to be somebody they were looking for. This was just somebody I was randomly talking to because I'm friendly. Okay,
Yeah. Mhm.
There's no laws. Don't me.
No, well, I'm listening. I'm agreeing with your flow and your conversation.
And so what happened was they started looking at me and they started asking me questions, and they as per usual they wondered why a transsexual woman who was wearing a big poofy jacket, smoking a cigarette with a quote-unquote bejeweled purse. It was just a purple purse, with sequins things on it. A lot of girls have it.
So do you always dress like that?
In fact, that was one of the questions
Yeah.
that one of the cops asked me, and
You should have said like what?
and I basically buried myself. Anyway, I think we're going to be going away for a quick little jingle break. Be right back.
That was a great story, by the way.
After this short little break here.
Estás escuchando KBBF 89.1 FM, Radio Cultura. Está usted escuchando una radio cultural al servicio del norte de la bahía, KBBF 89.1 de FM.
All right. Hello, everybody. Again, you are listening to the Queer Life Radio Show, LGBT news, modern perspectives, roundtable discussions, and interviews. My guest for this evening is Mandi Hauwert. I just interviewed her in the last hour. If you'd like to hear the interview, you can go to thequeerlife.org and watch. Yes, I said watch this episode. We have a live streaming of the show online. Mandi Hauwert is the first openly trans correctional officer. We are doing the news and perspectives portion of the show, and we started talking about trans women standing outside of hotels, and I was just talking about how basically I was profiled as a prostitute.
Well, you are an Asian transgender woman standing outside of a hotel talking to a random guy.
Anyway, so you were saying that there was a trans woman in a hotel who was being questioned for having narcotics, and what was the actual outcome of that?
I don't actually know the outcome. I'm trying to find the news story right now, but essentially what it was is she was staying at the hotel with another transgender individual, and I'm going to say what do they call those guys at the front desk? But
Concierge
or whatever.
Yeah.
Checked them in and immediately calls the police and says that he believes that there's a prostitution thing going on inside the hotel. And, the police get there and they start to question her, and they find her quote unquote narcotics, her hormones, and they arrested her on suspicion of prostitution and, possessing narcotics. And I don't know what actually happened at the end. I don't believe they actually kept her, but I believe she was kept for a while. She wasn't released immediately. I do know that. From what I understand, she did have a prior record for what I do not know. But at the same time, she was literally had the police called on her because she was a transgender person at a hotel. And this can happen to any of us, right? It doesn't matter if you're a trans person of color, a white trans person, whatever. If you're trans, depending on where you're at and what state you're in and who you're around, people are going to make a ton of assumptions about you.
Right.
And they're just going to do it. There's nothing really do about that, right? And the only thing we can do is to talk about it and to expose that and to expose those individuals. I still say we need to have like a social media site where we take pictures and expose people who are bigots and.
I mean, I say that's even happened to me. Not that I'm like a bastion of morality, or don't give me that look. But I say that even it happens to me as somebody who's living in Sonoma County, which is a progressive, liberal, fairly accepting county in Northern California.
Yeah.
And if you were in a state where there weren't as many protections or weren't as much education or knowledge or proliferation, then it's going to happen.
Yeah.
And it's if you are questioning your gender identity and you're worried, well, I don't want those things to happen to me. Nobody wants that to happen.
No.
I mean, it's not your fault if it happens to you. It wasn't my fault. I mean, I probably should have been a little bit more mindful, of what it might have looked like.
It doesn't matter what it looked like.
Yeah, but I mean,
they had zero reason to suspect you of anything.
Right.
The only reason they gave in their own heads is that you're a trans woman standing outside of a hotel. That's it.
Yeah.
And that's no reason. That's not reasonable suspicion.
Yeah.
Right. They had no reports of prostitution in the area or prostitution ring going on, like happening at the hotel. Oh my God, there are all these trans people. We had been at that hotel for quite a while.
Yeah, living there.
Yeah. We're one step above living in a van down by the river. Right.
Now we're motivational speakers.
Yeah. And so obviously the hotel, the people around the hotel didn't report us because they knew who we were.
Yeah.
Right. So these cops, these police, were simply profiling, plain and simple. No way around that.
Right.
And it's very despicable. Right.
And it's not their fault as individuals. I say it's more of a societal issue.
It's more about education. It's even if they weren't doing it consciously. There's a test online. I haven't yet to take it yet, but there's a few tests online that test what they call implicit bias. Implicit bias is something that basically it tests different things that you're biased against without even knowing it.
Is that kind of like the Blade Runner test for a machine?
Probably, yeah. To see if you're actually human.
Yeah.
Or can you pass as human, right?
Yeah.
The Turing test. And essentially all the test does is it kind of reveals your implicit biases.
Interesting.
You know, and it's definitely something I want to look into and kind of play with. It'd be kind of fun to see. Because I'm sure I do, right? Like everybody does.
Everybody's got bias.
No matter what skin color you are, what background you're from, rich, poor, black,
how educated,
white, how educated, yeah. It doesn't matter what country you're from. Everybody has implicit biases. And the more we try to realize that, the better we're going to be off as individuals and as people. Because when we recognize, you know, you hear a lot of people say, especially white people, oh, I'm not racist, or I don't think that way, or whatever. No, you do, and you are. Right?
Oh, I would never say that. I'm very accepting. I have got so many gay friends.
Yeah, and here's the thing: is those are not necessarily inherently bad things. It's just what they are. But when you deny them, then you're unable to address them. You're unable to work on them, to fix them, in a sense. So by ignoring your implicit biases, by ignoring that little voice in your head that tells you to cross the street when you see a black guy in a hoodie coming at you, you know, when you ignore those things, then you're unable to kind of make any changes in your own life and in each other's lives. So recognizing implicit biases are extremely important.
Well, it sounds like it's a move towards mindfulness and being aware of what you're thinking, what you're saying, what you're doing. For a lot of people say, oh, I didn't even mean to say that, or I didn't even mean to do that.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I mean, most people have had parents have said to you, think before you say something.
Well, it's like you know, before I came out, I was, for lack of a better term, a straight white man, right? Possibly, or considered to be one of the best things you can be in today's world, a straight white man. You know,
do you get like a card when you're born? You know,
yeah, I get a
club.
Well, I'm not allowed to talk about that.
Oh, okay. It's like Fight Club.
Now, background wise, I'm racially mixed, but I look white, so that's all that matters, right? It doesn't matter what my racial background is. What matters is that I'm perceived as being white, so that's how I'm treated. It doesn't even matter how I identify. Race is more or less social based on the way you look, right? So if you look black, you get treated like you're black. If you look Asian, you get treated like Asian. If you look white, you get treated like you're white. But one of the things I always found interesting when I was growing up is listening to other people talk about how if you are a white person and you meet somebody and you say something racist, and then that white person goes, oh, well, I have a black friend and I dated a black girl in high school and I knew a Mexican. He lived next door. We were tight. You know, they start throwing out like name dropping, but with race. Qualifiers like, no.
It's okay because this one person gave me permission to say that.
It's cool. It's cool because I know somebody like you, or I once talked to somebody like you, or I gave them a sandwich or something.
Right.
Right. So, what was interesting about those interactions is I honestly didn't really kind of connect with that experience or understand it, right? Like, what are they talking about? But then after I came out as being a trans woman, I went from being a white man to a trans woman.
Top of the world
to near the bottom, right?
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, like when people would say stuff, oh no, I know a bunch of gay people, or I love drag queens, they're great. And all of a sudden I was like, oh my gosh, like I get it. Like in a different way, right? It's a little different, but
yeah. Well, all of a sudden you had become one of the you had been socially put into the status of minority.
No, that's really what it was. Is I all of a sudden realized that just by coming out and being who I have always been,
right?
I went from being a social majority, or to being a social minority, and that's not to say I experience all these crazy things that other minority groups experience. It's just that experience to me was pretty surprising.
Right.
Maybe one of these days I'll write about it. And it's very interesting. And it's very interesting to go from not truly recognizing those things that happen to people, even when those people are telling you that this is
Right.
what's going on, this is what's happening. Like you get followed around in the store,
Right.
or or you get stopped for being possibly a prostitute.
Oh my gosh.
Right. that has not happened to me yet. I'm not saying that it's impossible for it to happen to me, but it's probably less likely being a trans white woman, right? Statistically, it's less likely to happen. It doesn't mean it hasn't happened to other white trans women.
Right.
So, but there is, again, we need to recognize that there are differences, right? There are things that trans women of color go through that are separate from trans women who are not of color, like in other words, white trans women,
Right.
or trans men, right? And like even for you as a trans woman of color. And I say that because you are perceived as one, right? You're
I'm
perceived
perceived as one.
as being Asian.
Yeah,
Whether you
but I'm
ident-
half white.
You're half white.
Yeah.
I'm only half white,
Yeah.
right? But the other half of me doesn't shine through. It doesn't show through. I look like I have pale skin and freckles.
Yeah.
And now I've dyed my hair red, so
Yeah.
I look even more white.
Yeah.
Right?
Perception.
It's perception, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know. There's just so much that I'm learning about not only myself but race and privilege
Mm-hmm.
and everything else. And it's really, really fascinating to me.
Yeah.
And the experience that a trans woman of color has growing up, even before she or he comes out, is way different from my growing up, right?
Yeah.
Like way different. Like a lot of individuals have had to deal with racial issues and racism and poverty issues or anything. It doesn't matter what race you are. Those things kind of separate individuals. I didn't have to deal with poverty. I didn't have to deal with racial issues as far as being a racial minority. I didn't have to deal with being openly gay or lesbian or even trans growing up, right? And
Although cops did talk to you as a kid.
well, that's because my brother was always getting in trouble. They just wanted to make sure I wasn't going to follow in his footsteps.
Well, you certainly have not.
No.
I'm a cop. You do.
Yeah, I'm a cop, and I wear high heels, so
Well, you don't know if he wears high heels.
he might.
Yeah.
Most people aren't even aware that I have a brother because they don't really talk about him very much. And I know he's, if he is listening or listen to this, I am sorry that I don't talk about you much, but I know he doesn't support me in what I'm doing as a trans person, and that's fine. That's his prerogative. He's allowed to do that. He's allowed to believe that way. But I'm also allowed to not have that negative influence in my life,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I choose to not have him as part of my life.
Is it hard to have a sibling that isn't supportive?
Yeah, of course. And obviously it's really hard, but I'm extremely lucky. So even within the trans community, not only am I lucky because I have a job, I have a good job, I have a stable roof over my head, a stable job and all that. And I also have family that's supportive, parents, sister that's extremely supportive. So I'm extremely lucky in all those ways. And those are things that I have to acknowledge and recognize.
Although in your article, the Dear Mom and Dad, it came out as a shock to them.
No, it did. No,
Yeah.
they didn't accept me right away.
Yeah.
No, it took about 4 or 5 years.
They
never kicked me out of the house, right? I never was unwelcome at home. It was always kind of weird when I went home.
Yeah.
And, the article doesn't say how long it took them to come around, but they did.
Mhm.
And that's all that matters to me is that they came around and that they accept me.
I understand your sister has been a huge supporter.
No, she's my biggest supporter, my biggest fan, my
Yeah.
biggest cheerleader. We're best friends, like truly.
That's wonderful.
Mhm.
Yeah, and what an incredible thing to have the support of your family as a trans woman.
No, it's unbelievable, and I parade my parents around as often as possible because I want them to be an example to other parents of transgender children, whether your child is 5 or 35 or 45 or 50, whatever. Anytime you have a parent who is supportive, they should be out there talking to other parents who are struggling to accept their children, right?
Right.
Even parents who aren't struggling, just to kind of connect with other people who understand the type of issues they've had to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm not a parent of a trans child. I don't have children, right? So I can't really speak to most of their emotional struggles. I can listen to them and write about them in a way, and I can have an understanding of them, but I can't really delve into it because I'm not a parent, and I'm not the parent of a trans child either. So
If there's anything that you could say to anybody listening who has a child that may be questioning their gender identity or sexual orientation.
why are you laughing? If I had anything to say to anybody who has a child like that,
Yeah, what would you say to them?
to the parents,
To the parents, yeah. Because I'm sure there's a lot of parents out here who just saw their little boy all of a sudden put on his sister's princess costume.
yeah.
It's Halloween tomorrow night.
Which I love princess costumes.
Which
I never got to be a princess.
never got to be a
Halloween.
princess for Halloween.
One of these days.
Yeah.
I actually thought I might go as a guy this Halloween and stuff my pants with a sock because it'd be amazing, right? Kind of funny.
Oh my gosh, that's so ridiculous.
Anyway, what I would say to any parent who has a transgender child or a child who's starting to identify differently than what you assume them to be is simply to do what you always promised yourself you would do when they were first born, is that you were going to love and support them forever, no matter what. And parents always tell themselves and they tell their children that I love you unconditionally.
Mm-hmm.
And most of the time they don't really mean it. They don't mean unconditionally, because as soon as a child comes out as being different from what they expected, a lot of parents throw them to the curb, sometimes literally, right? And that's very despicable. How dare you, right? As a parent, as somebody who brings somebody into the world, and then you forsake them for being different than what you wanted them to be. It's a parent's job to love and support their child, to be there for them when they need to be, right? And the only thing I have to say to those parents who do that kind of thing or having those kind of struggles is just kind of think about how much you love your child and whether or not you would rather have, if you have a son who wants to be a woman, wants to identify as a girl, would you rather have a dead son or a daughter that's alive that you can talk to and get to know? I mean, if you'd rather have a dead son, then I don't have anything to say to you. And I can't imagine anyone who would do that or say that.
Right.
You know.
And it's there is a lot of pain and difficulty in understanding when it comes to accepting your child's differences.
Mm-hmm.
And I say this as a child. I'm not a parent. I'm not a parent.
Yes.
But I know what I wanted, and I know what I needed, and I know what I had that helped me become the woman that I am today.
Mm-hmm.
And I say that to I address other parents out there and say, hey, you know, if you do indeed have a child that's questioning his or her gender identity, or isn't even putting it into words and is just grabbed your heels and started walking around, or or your daughter is all of a sudden saying, you know, I want to be Spider-Man for Halloween.
Yeah.
Let her be Spider-Man.
Yeah.
Does it hurt you?
Well, I want to point out, just because you have a child who wants to wear the clothing of a different gender, or what you associate with being a different gender, does not mean your child is transgender.
Yeah.
Just because you have a child that says, a little boy that says they're a girl, does not necessarily mean they're transgender. The key here is to support diversity and exploration.
Yep.
To allow the child the freedom to express themselves in open ways. And if they are trans, they're going to grow up in an environment that's loving and caring and supportive, and they're going to be incredibly healthy emotionally, right? Compared to the rest of us who are not so well off all the time. But growing up in an environment that's the opposite of that condemns open expression and freedom in that way, is you're going to do nothing but cause irreparable harm to that child as they grow older.
Yeah.
And there are scars that you and I have, that other older trans women have, trans men have, that'll never go away. And all we can do is to learn to live with them. Right? All we can do is to learn to get by them, but they're always going to be there. And those scars make us who we are. They make us strong individuals, but I would so much rather be living without scars.
So let's work on creating a new generation and a new world where kids don't have to get these scars.
No. And yeah, I think it's a goal that the entire LGBT community has.
Absolutely. Mandy, I want to take that note to thank you for coming into this episode of The Queer Life. Arigatou gozaimasu. Dou itashimashite.
Domo arigatou gozaimashita.
And I want to thank all the listeners out there for listening. You are listening to the Queer Life Radio Show, LGBT news, modern perspectives, roundtable discussions, and interviews. I am your host, Kaiya Kramer. This is episode 64, my interview with Mandi Hauwert, the first openly trans correctional officer and blogger on Huffington Post. You can find all the links and writings and everything that we talked about on this show and more available on thequeerlife.org. You are listening to us here on KBBF 89.1 FM, Calistoga. Have a wonderful night.